Tombstone, Arizona Territory, autumn of 1883. The sun hung low, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. As Samuel Hargrove trudged through the dust-choked streets, his boots, worn thin from years of hard riding, kicked up clouds of grit that clung to his weathered duster. The air carried the sharp tang of sagebrush and the distant clatter of saloon pianos, their notes warped by the dry wind. Tombstone was a town that thrived on Couse miners, drifters, and outlaws, all drawn to its promise of silver and sin. Samuel, a rancher whose luck had long since dried up, felt the weight of every step as he approached the Gilded Spur Saloon. The Gilded Spur wasn't a place for honest men. Its warped wooden facade leaned like a drunk against the street, and the glow of oil lamps spilled through grimy windows, casting jagged shadows. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke, cheap whiskey, and the low hum of men bargaining their futures. Samuel pushed through the swinging doors, his broad shoulders brushing against the frame. He wasn't here for a drink. He was here because the bank had sent its final notice, because his cattle were dying in the parched fields of Redstone Ranch, and because his wife, Abigail, deserved better than watching their dreams crumble to dust. The saloon was alive with the usual crowd miners flashing silver nuggets, cowboys nursing grudges, and gamblers with eyes like vultures circling a dying steer. Samuel's gaze settled on a man at a corner table, his silk vest gleaming under the lamplight, a stark contrast to the town's grit. Victor Slade hadn't changed in the decade since they'd last crossed paths. Same sharp grin, same cold, calculating eyes, same air of a man who owned the room and everyone in it. Back then, they'd nearly come to blows over a cheated hand of poker. Tonight, Samuel felt fate pulling them back together, like a noose tightening. "Hargrove," Slade's voice cut through the din, smooth as venom. "Heard your ranch is drier than a preacher's sermon. Care to sit?" He gestured to an empty chair, his rings glinting. Samuel's jaw tightened, but he approached, his spurs jingling faintly. "Thought you'd be swinging from a gallows by now, Slade," he replied, voice low and steady. Slade laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Tombstone's a forgiving town. Join me. Let's see if your luck's turned." Samuel hesitated. Every instinct screamed to walk away, but the image of Redstone Ranch, its sagging fences, its skeletal cattle, Abigail's quiet sight rooted him to the spot. He was out of options, his savings gone, the bank circling like a buzzard. "What's the stake?" he asked, pulling out the chair. Slade's grin widened, predatory. "High rollers tonight, Hargrove. $500 cash or something else of value." Samuel's gut churned. "Ain't got that kind of money." Slade leaned back, snapping his fingers. From the shadows, one of his men shoved a figure forward, a girl, no more than 14. Scrawny and dirt-streaked, her dark hair tangled like a bird's nest. Her face was sharp, all angles and defiance, with eyes that burned like embers in a dying fire. They weren't the eyes of a child. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much, survived too much. "Street rat," Slade said, casual as if discussing livestock. "Owes me more than her life's worth. She's my wager. Win the hand, she's yours. Lose, and you walk away poorer than you came." Samuel's stomach twisted. Gambling for a human life felt like a sin he couldn't wash off, but the thought of losing Redstone, of failing Abigail, drowned his conscience. The girl's gaze locked onto his, unyielding, her lips pressed into a thin line. No fear, just a flicker of something deeper, anger, maybe, or judgment. It unnerved him. "What's your name, kid?" Samuel asked, his voice softer than he intended. "Leela," she answered, her tone rough, like she'd swallowed gravel. "Leela Kane," Slade chuckled. "Got fire in her. Might make a decent hand if you win, Hargrove." Samuel's fists clenched under the table. He didn't trust Slade, never had, never would, but walking away meant losing more than pride. It meant losing everything. "Deal the cards," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. The game was 5-card draw, no wilds, no second chances. The saloon grew quiet, the air thick with anticipation as chips hit the table. Samuel's heart thudded as he studied his hand, strong, but not a sure thing. Slade's smirk never wavered, his confidence a blade held to Samuel's throat. The final draw came. Samuel swapped 2 cards, his fingers steady despite the tremor in his soul. "Three of a kind," Slade declared, laying down his cards with a flourish. Samuel exhaled, spreading his own hand of full house. The room buzzed with murmurs. Slade's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Well, damn," he said, voice dripping with false amusement. "The girl's yours." Samuel stood, pocketing the small pile of winnings. "I didn't come for this, but I ain't leaving her with you." Leela stepped forward, her expression unreadable, but those ember-like eyes gleamed with something Samuel recognized as resilience, raw and unyielding. "Let's go," he told her, pushing through the saloon doors into the cool desert night. As they left, Samuel felt Slade's gaze burning into his back, a predator biding his time. Tombstone, he muttered under his breath, was a town that never let a debt go unpaid. The wagon rattled along the rutted trail toward Redstone Ranch, the stars above sharp and cold against the black sky. Samuel guided the horses, their hooves kicking up dust that shimmered in the moonlight. Beside him sat Leela, her small frame hunched under his old wool coat, too big for her thin shoulders. She hadn't spoken since they left Tombstone, her eyes scanning the horizon like a hawk waiting for danger. Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that he'd won something far heavier than a poker game. "You always this quiet?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice was gruff, worn by years of shouting over wind and cattle. Leela shrugged, her gaze fixed on the distant mesas. "Depends if there's something worth saying." Samuel snorted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Fair enough." The trail wound through sagebrush and jagged rock, the faint howl of a coyote echoing in the distance. Redstone Ranch lay hours ahead, nestled in a valley where the San Pedro River carved a thin, silvery path. Samuel adjusted his grip on the reins. "You worked for Slade?" he asked, glancing at her. Lila's eyes flicked toward him, guarded. "Around him, not for him." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Same thing out here." "Not to me," she shot back, her voice sharp but controlled. "Too old for her years." Samuel recognized that tone hearted in the voices of men broken by the frontier, women hardened by loss. It didn't belong in a girl so young. "You owe him money," he pressed. Lila's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I owed him my freedom. Caught me lifting a sack of flour from his storehouse. He could have taken my hand for it like his punishment's public." She paused, staring at the trail. "Offered me a deal instead. Run errands, spy on his rivals, keep my mouth shut." Samuel's stomach knotted. Slade's cruelty was no secret, but using a kid like that, it was a different kind of evil. "You steal from him again?" he asked. Leela shook her head. "No. Stop being useful. So he staked me in a game." Her voice was flat, but the words carried a weight that made Samuel's chest ache. "Men like him," she added, "they like breaking things just to prove they can." Samuel fell silent, the creak of the wagon and the clop of hooves filling the void. The desert stretched endless around them, a land that forgave nothing. "You hungry?" he asked after a while. Leela shrugged. "Ate 2 days ago." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Abigail fixed that. She don't tolerate empty bellies." Lila's expression flickered out, maybe hope, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by that wary, ember-like stare. They crested a rise, and Redstone Ranch came into view below. The ranch house stood weathered but sturdy, its adobe walls bleached by years of sun. A sagging barn leaned against the wind, and a handful of scrawny cattle grazed in patchy pastures. It wasn't much, but it was home. Samuel pulled the horses to a stop by the porch. "This is it," he said. Leela scanned the place with a cool, assessing eye. "Looks like it's hanging on by a thread." "Ain't wrong," Samuel admitted. "But it's ours." The door swung open, and Abigail Hargrove stepped onto the porch, her dark hair pinned tightly, her apron dusted with flour. Her eyes, sharp and green, locked onto Leela instantly. "Samuel Hargrove," she said, voice low with suspicion. "What in heaven's name have you brought home?" "This is Leela Kane," Samuel said, climbing down from the wagon. "She's help." Abigail's gaze didn't soften. "Help? She's a child. Child or not, she's quick," Samuel replied. "We need hands, Abigail. You know that." He hesitated, unsure how to explain the poker game, the desperation that drove him to it, or the fire in Lila's eyes that made him say yes. Leela slid off the wagon, landing lightly in the dust, her chin raised defiantly. Abigail studied her, arms crossed. "How old are you, girl?" 14, Leela answered. 15 come spring. Abigail's eyes narrowed. Then she sighed, gesturing toward the house. "Inside. You look like you've been sleeping in a ditch." "Sometimes," Leela said plainly, stepping forward. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread, a warmth that clashed with the tension in the air. The furniture was simple worn chairs, a scrubbed oak table, a quilt thrown over a sagging sofa. Abigail busied herself at the stove, ladling stew into a bowl, while Leela stood by the table, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's. "Sit," Abigail said, not unkindly. "No one starves under my roof." Leela hesitated, then sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Samuel leaned against the doorway, watching the scene unfold. Abigail slid a bowl of stew and a hunk of bread in front of Leela, who ate slowly, as if waiting for the food to be snatched away. "You don't have to run," Abigail said, catching Lila's glance toward the door. "No one's chasing you here." Lila's jaw tightened, but she nodded once, her eyes never leaving the bowl. Samuel crossed his arms, his mind heavy. He'd brought a stranger into their home, a girl with a past as tangled as barbed wire. But as Abigail's stern expression softened and Lila's shoulders eased just a fraction, he sensed Redstone Ranch was about to change for better or for worse. The first week with Leela was like walking a tightrope in a windstorm. Abigail, though kind at her core, carried the weight of years of struggle-failed crops, sick cattle, and the ghost of a child they'd never had. She wasn't cruel, but trust came hard, especially for a girl who looked like she'd been raised by wolves. Samuel felt the same unease, maybe sharper. Leela was no ordinary child, and the shadows in her eyes hinted at a past that could bring trouble to their door. Leela took to ranch work with a quiet ferocity. She hauled water, mucked stalls, and repaired fences with a speed that surprised Samuel. She didn't complain, didn't chatter, just worked, her movements precise and deliberate. But there were moments, fleeting glimpses of the girl beneath the armor. The way her eyes softened when she stroked the nose of their old mare, Daisy, or the way she lingered by the creek, watching the water catch the sunlight. She didn't trust them, not yet, but Samuel saw her watching, weighing, deciding. One morning, Samuel found Leela perched on a fence post, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. A storm was brewing, the air heavy with the promise of rain. "Gonna be a wet one," Samuel remarked, joining her. Leela nodded. "Smells like thunder." Her voice was quiet, but there was a steadiness to it, like she'd faced worse than a storm. "You always watch the horizon like that?" Samuel asked, leaning against the fence. Leela shrugged. "Habit. Streets teach you to keep one eye open." Samuel studied hearth dirt smudged on her cheek, the too big shirt rolled up at the sleeves. She looked fragile, but her eyes told a different story. "You sleeping okay?" he asked. Lila's shoulders twitched, non-committal. "Good enough." Samuel sighed. "Look, I know this ain't a palace, and Abigail's tough, but she's fair. Give her time." Lila's gaze met his, sharp and searching. "I ain't here for handouts, Hargrove. You won me. I work." Samuel's chest tightened at the reminder. The poker game, Slad's cold grin, the weight of a choice he still wasn't sure was right. "You ain't a prize, Leela," he said firmly. "You're here because I couldn't leave you with him. That's all." Lila's eyes softened, just for a moment, before the wall went back up. "You always bet on strays?" she asked. "First time," Samuel admitted. "Might be my worst call yet." A faint smile tugged at Lila's lips, gone as quickly as it came. That evening, over a supper of beans and cornbread, Abigail broke the silence. "You any good with a needle, Leela?" she asked, nodding toward a pile of torn shirts by the hearth. Leela blinked, caught off guard. "I can mend." "Ain't fancy." Abigail handed her a shirt. "Fancy don't fix fences or shirts. Practical does." Samuel watched as the two found a rhythm, the clink of spoons and the soft pull of thread filling the quiet. Later, as the house settled into the night, Leela appeared in the kitchen, barefoot and sleepless, her eyes heavy. "Can't sleep?" Samuel asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Leela shook her head. "Too still." In Tombstone, quiet meant trouble. Samuel nodded, understanding. This ain't Tombstone, but trouble's got a way of finding folks who've crossed Slade. Leela's gaze flicked to the window, her fingers tightening around her knees. He won't let me go, she said softly. Not for long. Samuel sipped his coffee, the warmth steadying him. If he comes, we'll handle it. Redstone looks after its own. Leela didn't respond, but her posture eased slightly. You ever work cattle? He asked, shifting the subject. No, Leela admitted. Stole a horse once, though. Didn't fall off. Samuel chuckled. That's a start. Ranching's harder, but you're quick. You'll learn. Leela's lips twitched, almost a smile. I'm good at learning. They sat in silence, the night stretching around them. The distant howl of a coyote the only sound. Samuel knew trouble was coming, but for now Leela was safe. And that, he thought, might just be worth the gamble. The weeks that followed were a fragile kind of peace. Leela settled into Redstone's rhythm, rising before dawn to tackle chores with a focus that made Samuel proud. Abigail, though slow to warm, began teaching Leela small thing show to knead dough, how to patch a quilt. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. It started with sign-shift prints near the river, too fresh to belong to their hands. Then a broken fence, not weathered but cut clean through. Samuel told himself it was nothing drifters, maybe, but his gut said otherwise. One afternoon, Leela was weeding the garden when she froze, her eyes locked on the ridge. Samuel, repairing a gate nearby, noticed the shift in her stance, the way her hand hovered near the knife in her pocket. See something, he called. Leela didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Thought I saw a flash, she said finally, like light off a lens. Samuel's blood ran cold. A spyglass. That night, he sat with Abigail and Leela at the kitchen table, the air heavy. Tracks by the river, he said, his voice low. Someone's watching. And it ain't neighbors. Abigail's face paled. Slade, Leela's fingers twitched, her eyes darting to the shadows. He's not done with me, she said quietly. Samuel leaned forward. If you know something, Leela, now's the time. She hesitated, then reached into her boot, pulling out a small, worn notebook. Its pages were creased, the ink smudged but legible. Slade's ledger, she said. Not just debts. Names, payoffs, deals with sheriffs, maybe even a judge or two. Abigail gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Samuel's mind raced. This wasn't just a girl they'd taken, and it was a walking target. You were gonna use this? Samuel asked. Leela nodded. To buy my way out if he came for me. She looked around the room, her voice dropping. But now he's coming here. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Samuel thumbed through the notebook, the weight of it heavier than any gun. We could take it to the sheriff, Abigail suggested, her voice thin. Samuel shook his head. Sheriff Colton's probably in here too. We're on our own. Leela's eyes met his, steadied despite the fear. What do we do? Samuel exhaled, the responsibility settling like a stone. We get ready. That night, Samuel cleaned his old Colt revolver, its barrel scarred but true. Leela watched, her hands steady as she oiled a rifle. You ever shoot? Samuel asked. Once, she said. A drunk in an alley. Missed, Samuel snorted. Aim's the easy part. Living with it's harder. Leela didn't reply, but her eyes said she already knew. By morning, Samuel had reinforced the barn, checked the fences, and told Abigail to keep Leela close. He sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, watching the horizon. Tombstone's shadows stretched long, even out here in the desert. And Samuel Hargrove, rancher turned gambler, knew the bet he'd made in that smoky saloon was far from over. As the first light of dawn pierced the desert haze, Samuel Hargrove remained vigilant on the porch of Redstone Ranch, his rifle a cold comfort across his knees. The events of the previous day's mysterious tracks, the glint of a spyglass, and Leela's revelation of the damning ledger had woven a web of tension that hung heavy over the valley. He knew Victor Slade's shadow loomed larger than ever, and the fragile peace they'd carved out was about to be tested. Little did he know, the storm brewing on the horizon would force decisions that would reshape their lives forever. The shot rang out like a crack of thunder, jolting Samuel from his watchful stupor. He was on his feet in an instant, heart pounding as he scanned the ridge. Abigail burst through the door, her face pale but resolute, a shotgun clutched in her hands. "Samuel," she cried, her voice cutting through the early morning chill. Leela appeared beside her, eyes wide but steady. The old Henry rifle she'd cleaned the night before gripped tightly. "Get inside," Samuel ordered, his voice low and urgent. But Leela shook her head, stepping forward. "I ain't hiding." Before he could argue, another shot echoed, this one splintering the fence post near the barn. Hooves thundered in the distance, and from the ridge emerged a group of Redstone strong, dust billowing behind them like a shroud. At their lead was Harlan Voss, Slad's right-hand man, a brute with a scarred face and a reputation for cruelty that preceded him like a bad omen. Voss reined in his horse at the gate, his men fanning out behind him, rifles at the ready. "Hargrove," Voss bellowed, his voice gravelly from years of tobacco and whiskey. "We know you've got the girl. Hand her over, and we'll leave your sorry ranch standing." Samuel stepped off the porch, rifle raised but not aimed yet. "This is private land, Voss. Turn around and ride out." Voss laughed, a harsh bark that sent chills down Samuel's spine. "Slade says she's his property. And that little book she stole, that's coming back to." Lila's face hardened beside Samuel, her knuckles white on the rifle. Abigail positioned herself at the window, shotgun ready. The standoff stretched, the air thick with anticipation. Then, without warning, one of Voss's men fired, the bullet whizzing past Samuel's ear and thudding into the adobe wall. Chaos erupted. Samuel dove behind a water barrel, returning fire with a shot that grazed a rider's arm, sending him cursing into retreat. Leela crouched low, her aim steady as she squeezed the trigger, splintering a saddle and forcing another man to dismount. Abigail's shotgun boomed from the window, scattering the attackers further. The riders circled, firing wildly, bullets chewing into the barn and kicking up dirt. Smoke filled the air, acrid and choking. Samuel's mind reset. This wasn't just a raid. It was a declaration of war. He spotted two men flanking toward the house and sprinted across the yard, taking cover behind the wagon. His shot felled one, the man crumpling with a groan. Leela, exposed but fearless, fired again, hitting a horse's flank and sending the rider tumbling. But the numbers were against them. Voss shouted orders, his men regrouping for a charge. "Burn it down," he yelled, and Samuel's blood froze as a rider lit a rag stuffed into a bottle of kerosene. The makeshift firebomb arched through the air toward the barn. Time seemed to slow. Samuel aimed, but before he could fire, a crack from the ridge echoed a new shot, precise and deadly. The bottle shattered mid-air, flames sputtering harmlessly to the ground. Samuel whipped around to see figures on the hilltop, old Jedediah Thorne, a neighboring rancher and longtime friend, flanked by two of his sons, their rifles smoking. Relief surged through Samuel as Thorne's group descended, firing warning shots that scattered Voss's men. "Get out of here, Voss," Thorne shouted, his voice booming across the valley. Voss cursed, wheeling his horse. "This ain't over, Hargrove. Slade'll have his due." The raiders retreated in a cloud of dust, leaving behind the acrid scent of gunpowder and the moans of the wounded. As the dust settled, Samuel stood, his body aching from the adrenaline crash. Abigail rushed out, embracing him tightly. Leela lowered her rifle, her face smeared with dirt but her eyes fierce. "They're gone," she said, almost in disbelief. Samuel nodded, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "For now," Thorne approached, his weathered face grim. "Heard rumors in town. Figured you'd need backup." The aftermath was a blur of tending wounds and assessing damage. Bullet holes pocked the walls, a section of fence lay in ruins, but Redstone stood. That night, round the kitchen table, the group debriefed. "Slade won't stop," Leela said quietly, her voice steady despite the day's horrors. Samuel agreed, his mind turning to the ledger still hidden in his coat. "We can't fight forever. I need to end this." The decision weighed heavy, but by morning, Samuel had a plan. He'd ride to Tombstone, confront Slade, and use the ledger as leverage. Abigail protested, fear etching her features, but she knew it was necessary. Leela insisted on coming, but Samuel refused. "Stay here, protect the ranch." As he saddled his horse under the rising sun, he felt the gravity of the moment. The bet he'd made months ago had evolved into something profound, a fight not just for land, but for family. The ride to Tombstone was long and dusty, the desert sun beating down like judgment. Samuel's thoughts churned, memories of the poker game, Leela's rival, the budding trust. By dusk, the town's lights flickered ahead, saloons alive with laughter and vice. The gilded spur loomed, its doors swinging like jaws. Inside, the familiar haze enveloped him. Slade sat at his table, cards in hand, his grin faltering as Samuel approached. "Hargrove," Slade drawled, eyes narrowing. "Bold, coming here after that mess at your ranch." Samuel pulled out the ledger, slamming it on the table. "This ends now. Names, dates, bribiceno to hang you twice over." The saloon hushed, tension crackling. Slade's face darkened, but he leaned back, calculating. "What do you want? Call off your dogs. Leave us be. Tell 'em the girl's dead, buried in the desert. In exchange, the ledgerno copies." Slade thumbed the pages, his empire's secrets laid bare. After a taut silence, he nodded. "Deal. But cross me again, and I'll raise your world." Samuel didn't flinch. "Same goes for you." Riding back under the stars, Samuel felt a cautious relief. The deal was struck, but trust in a man like Slade was fool's gold. Yet, for the first time, hope flickered. Perhaps Redstone could heal. Weeks turned 2 months without incident. No riders on the ridge, no tracks by the river. Rain came, greening the pastures, and the cattle fattened. Leela thrived, her hands calloused from work, her spirit unbroken. Abigail taught her to sew and cook, while Samuel showed her the intricacies of ranching, branding, herding, reading the land. But change brewed beneath the calm. One evening, as Samuel and Leela repaired tack in the barn, she broke the silence. "Why'd you really win me in that game?" Her question hung heavy. Samuel set down his tools. "Saw myself in you, stubborn, fighting against the odds. Couldn't let Slade break that." Leela's eyes glistened. "So you saved me." "Not saved. Gave you a chance." Leela paused, then spoke firmly. "I want to stay. Not as help, as family. Teach me everything, so I can run this place someday." Samuel's throat tightened. Adoption? It felt right. That night, over supper, they discussed it. Abigail's eyes welled with tears. "You're ours now, Leela." The papers were filed in town, simple but binding. Leela Kane became Leela Hargrove, a name that carried weight and promise. 5 years passed in a blur of seasons. By 1888, Redstone Ranch flourished, fields lush, herd doubled, barns sturdy. But the true change was in the people. It started with a boy orphaned by a mining accident, found shivering in the barn. Leela convinced Samuel to keep him. Then a girl fleeing abuse, then twins left by the wayside. Soon, 8 children called Redstone home, strays turned family. Leela, now 19, led them with quiet authority. She taught roping, reading, resilience. Samuel watched her one morning, guiding the young ones through chores. "You've built something here," he told her later. Leela smiled. "We all have." But shadows lingered, rumors of Slade's whereabouts, whispers of old grudges. Leela traced a scar from the raid, vowing to protect what they'd created. The ranch's reputation grew, drawing more lost souls. Redstone became a beacon, a testament to redemption. Yet, as the sun set on another day, Samuel knew peace was fragile. The wager in the dust had yielded unexpected riches, but the West was unforgiving, and old debts had a way of resurfacing. As the years rolled on like tumbleweeds across the vast Arizona plains, Redstone Ranch stood as a testament to resilience, its fields thriving and its barns echoing with the laughter of the found family it had gathered. The shadows of Victor Slade's grudge seemed to fade into distant memory, but Samuel Hargrove knew better than to let his guard down completely, for the West had a habit of resurrecting old ghosts when least expected. Little did he anticipate that the true legacy of his fateful wager would unfold in ways that affirmed the power of second chances, weaving a tapestry of hope amid the harsh realities of frontier life. The spring of 1893 brought a gentle warmth to the San Pedro Valley, where Redstone Ranch sprawled under a sky as blue as a robin's egg. The air hummed with the buzz of bees in the blooming mesquite, and the river ran clear and steady, nourishing the green pastures that now supported a robust herd of cattle. Leela Hargrove, now 24, and as integral to the ranch as its very soil, stood on the porch, her hands resting on the weathered rail as she watched a dust cloud rise on the horizon. It was a wagon, creaking along the rutted trail, carrying what she suspected were more souls in need of refuge. Samuel emerged from the barn, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana, his hair now fully silvered by time and toil. Abigail followed close behind, her steps slower but her spirit undimmed, a basket of fresh eggs dangling from her arm. "Looks like company," Samuel remarked, squinting against the sun. Leela nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. The ranch's reputation as a haven for the lost had spread far beyond Tombstone, whispered in mining camps and frontier towns, drawing orphans and runaways like moths to a flame. The wagon pulled up, driven by old Jedediah Thorne, his face lined with the maps of a hard life, but his eyes twinkling with purpose. Beside him sat a girl of about 11, her blonde hair matted and her dress torn, clutching a small bundle. In the back, two boys huddled together, one sturdy and defiant, the other small and wide-eyed, both bearing the marks of hardship. "Brought you some more strays, Hargrove," Thorne called out, tipping his hat. "Found 'em wandering near the border. No kin to speak of." Leela stepped forward, her presence calm and commanding. She'd grown into a woman of quiet strength, her ember-like eyes now softened by experience, but still sharp with the wisdom of her past. "Welcome to Redstone," she said gently, extending a hand to help the girl down. The child hesitated, then took it, her grip tentative. "I'm Leela." "What's your name?" "Emma," the girl whispered, glancing at the boys. "These are my brothers, Caleb and Ben." The older boy, Caleb, puffed out his chest. "We don't need charity," Leela chuckled softly. "No charity here. Just work and a fair shake. You'll earn your keep, same as everyone." Within hours, the newcomers were settled. Abigail bustled in the kitchen, preparing a hearty meal of stew and biscuits, while Samuel showed the boys the barn, assigning simple tasks to ease them in. The other children, numbering over a dozen, gathered curiously, sharing stories and offering tentative friendships. Ruth, one of the first rivals, now a confident young woman, took Emma under her wing, showing her the garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the mesas in hues of orange and purple, the family gathered around the long oak table. Laughter mingled with the clink of utensils, stories flowing like the river outside. Samuel watched Leela at the head, guiding conversations with ease, and felt a swell of pride. She'd transformed from the wary street rat into the heart of Redstone, her leadership natural and inspiring. After supper, as the children scattered to evening chores or games in the yard, Samuel pulled Leela aside on the porch. The stars were emerging, pinpricks of light in the velvet sky. "You've done more for this place than I ever could," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Leela shook her head. "We built it together. You gave me a chance when no one else would." Samuel leaned on the rail, gazing at the horizon. "Slad's been quiet these years. Rumors say he's holed up in Mexico, dodging the law." Leela's expression tightened, her fingers tracing an old scar on her arm, a reminder of the raid. "Men like him don't fade away. But we're stronger now." Samuel nodded. "That we are." The months unfolded with the rhythm of ranch life. Emma proved quick with animals, her gentle touch calming even the wildest colts. Caleb, initially rebellious, found purpose in fencing and herding, his defiance channeling into determination. Ben, the youngest, blossomed under Abigail's care, his laughter a balm for the older woman's childless heart. Leela oversaw it all, teaching not just skills but honesty, hard work, compassion. But peace was never absolute in the West. Whispers reached Redstone of unrest in Tombstone jumpers, corrupt officials, echoes of Slad's old network. One crisp autumn day, a stranger rode in, his horse lathered and his eyes shifty. "Looking for work," he claimed, but Leela's instincts prickled. She turned him away politely, but that night she doubled the watches. The incident stirred old fears. Around the fire one evening, with the children asleep, Samuel, Abigail, and Leela discussed it. "Could be nothing," Abigail said, though her voice wavered. Leela stared into the flames. "Or Slad's testing the waters," Samuel's jaw set. "If he comes, we'll be ready." But we've got more than guns, now we've got a legacy. By 1898, Redstone had expanded, new bunkhouses built by the children's hands. The herd tripled through savvy trades. Leela, at 29, was a force negotiating with suppliers, mediating disputes, inspiring loyalty. Newspapers from Tucson printed stories of the orphan ranch, praising its model of redemption. Philanthropists sent donations, but Leela insisted on self-sufficiency, teaching the kids that true worth came from within. One summer morning, Leela found Samuel by the river, fishing pole in hand, a rare moment of leisure. Thinking about the old days, she asked, sitting beside him. Samuel reeled in his line. That poker game felt like a curse then. Nah, best decision I ever made, Leela smiled. Changed everything. They sat in companionable silence, the water murmuring secrets. As winter approached, a letter arrived from Thorn, warnings of Slad's return. Sighted in Yuma with a new gang. Tension rippled through Redstone. Leela gathered the older children, training them in defense without alarming the young ones. We protect our own, she said, echoing Samuel's words from years ago. The confrontation came on a stormy night, thunder rumbling like distant cannon fire. Riders approached, shadows in the rain slate at the fore, older but no less menacing. Hargrove, he shouted over the wind. Time to settle up. Samuel, rifle ready, stepped out. Deal was done, Slade. Lever regret it. Slade laughed. That ledger bought time, not freedom. But as his men advanced, lights flickered on the ridge-neighbors, alerted by Thorn, armed and resolute. Outnumbered, Slade snarled. This ain't over. But he retreated, vanishing into the storm. In the aftermath, Redstone stood unbroken. The incident, though harrowing, solidified their bonds. Leela addressed the family at dawn. We faced the dark and won. That's what Redstone icelight in the shadows. The turn of the century brought prosperity. By 1900, Redstone was legendary, children grown into capable adults, some staying, others venturing out but always returning. Samuel, now in his 60s, passed the reins to Leela formally. It's yours, he said at a gathering. Leela accepted with grace. Ours, she corrected. One evening, as fireflies danced, Leela sat with Samuel and Abigail, reflecting. That wager in the dust, Samuel mused, brought us you and all this. Abigail squeezed Leela's hand. Family isn't blood, it's choice. Leela nodded, eyes on the stars. And we'll keep choosing hope. Redstone endured, a sanctuary against injustice, proving that even in a violent world, kindness could prevail. The legacy of one man's gamble became a beacon for generations. This concludes the story, wrapping up with a satisfying resolution that emphasizes themes of redemption, family, and resilience. The narrative builds to climactic confrontations, explores moral complexities around violence and second chances, and ends on an uplifting note. What are your thoughts on the portrayal of violence in the West and the injustices overcome by the characters? Do you believe redemption is always possible, or are some debts too deep? Share your stance in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspectives.